Hello, I'm Mr. Eliason, and welcome to the second semester of World History. My voice still hasn't totally recovered yet, so you'll have to bear with me, but today we're going to dive in and talk about the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution in England. So, obviously, this is sort of a broad topic, and we're going to go back in time a little bit in order to look at the foundations of the Industrial Revolution, which is going to profoundly change European society and set Europe sort of on the path to dominate the world in the 19th and 20th century. So, let's dive in and move forward. Here are your objectives for today. Take a moment and pause and take them in, and let's dive into our story. All of the whole industrial revolution has many, like any major societal change, is going to have many different sort of antecedents and causes. One of the main things that led to this massive expansion of technology is something called the second industrial revolution. As you hopefully remember from earlier in this class, the Neolithic Revolution was the agricultural revolution in which people started domesticating plants and animals in order to secure their own food supply. Well, the second industrial revolution is going to significantly streamline that process, introducing a whole bunch of new innovations that increases the productivity of farmland and allows a smaller group of people to produce all the food and agricultural supplies necessary for everybody. So they're going to introduce things like crop rotation, rather than having to leave fields fallow for a period of time, which obviously fallow means not planting in the fields. So rather than leaving a portion of your agricultural land totally not being used, the crop rotation system is going to allow for farmers to continuously use their fields by using a series of complementary crops in order to keep the level of nutrients and nitrogen in the soil constant. And so by moving through these different groups of crops, you can use the fields at all times and still be managed to keep the soil, both keep the soil fertile and be productive. New innovations like the seed drill here allow farmers to plant their crops in orderly rows, which both increase the likelihood of the seeds germinating and make them much easier to harvest. We're also going to see mechanical harvesting and threshing equipment start to be used. And so, as these new innovations come in, animals are able to do more of the work. People are able to more effectively harvest their crops, and it's going to require fewer people to do the same amount of work in the fields. So, on the one hand, this is spectacularly good. Obviously, increasing the amount of productivity of farmers is going to increase the amount of food that is produced, but there's going to be some unintended consequences of this as well. Obviously, fewer people doing the work means that fewer people are needed to do the work. And so this is going to lead to a cutting down of jobs and the eventual collapse of this whole feudal movement. As large landowners are able to farm more land with the use of fewer people, we start getting the enclosure movement. Large farmers are going to enclose off larger areas of land, pushing the peasants who used to use that communal land off of it and forcing them to make other choices about how they're going to make their living. And so this is going to lead to the breakdown of the sort of rural feudalism that we'd seen. And it's going to lead to more and more of these peasants seeking opportunities elsewhere, mainly in the new growing cities of England, which where we're going to start to see industrialization producing a lot of these new tools. And so all of this helps to self-reinforce itself to create a massive population movement over a period of time from urban to rural, and the substantial increase in the size of rural estates. All of this movement to cities, of course, creates new opportunity for people in a lot of these new factories, but is going to create a whole host of problems that are going to necessitate solutions. Obviously, pollution is going to be a factor in these new industrial cities, as is substandard housing and poverty. As a increase in the number of workers means that they're not going to be able to demand high wages. And so we're going to see a lot of very low paid workers. And a significant increase in population density is also going to lead to problems with sanitation, endemic diseases, the need for some form of public work and sanitation projects, and obviously a lot of other social and societal problems, including, of course, also poverty, crime, addiction, things like that. At the same time, the other thing fueling this is mercantilism. European countries, especially England, had valuable territories that they had conquered around the world, some of which they had settled and some of them they had merely subjugated. We talked a little bit about this in the settlement of the Americas, and we talked briefly about the British expanding into India. But of course, we're going to be spending much more time on the British in South Asia, Africa, China, places like that in future units. So just know that all of these raw materials and the gold flowing into these European countries is going to be one of the major precursors for industrialization, because the raw materials provide the tools for industrialization, whereas the gold and silver provides the capital needed to build the infrastructure necessary for industrialization. This move towards the factory system is also going to significantly increase productivity. Prior to this, there was a guild system in which people who wanted to be craftsmen had to move up the path from move up a hierarchy from apprentices to journeymen to masters. And there was also this whole putting out system where wealthy people sent raw materials into people's houses for them to spin and weave cloth, and then they would bring it back into the cities. This was a relatively efficient system, but it was very decentralized and so therefore difficult to control. Also, the fact that that they were sending all of these goods into individual people's houses meant that they were not able to buy some of the new expensive equipment for all of these houses, and so it was much less efficient. And so a factory is going to bring all of that labor together and concentrate it in one place. There's then going to be an overseer or some sort of manager who then makes sure that everyone is working together to do these things. And they're going to be able to afford this new technology, making it much more efficient. So over a long period of time, factories are going to squeeze out cottage industries and really squeeze out the guild system, because these new machines are going to replace the sort of skilled craftsmanship that used to be required to make a lot of these finished products. Take a moment and pause and read Robert Owen explaining what the effect of all of this is, and then answer the appropriate questions, and then we'll move on. Robert Owen was a well-known British industrialist and is going to be one of the characters that's going to feature somewhat prominently in our story here for the first few lessons. This eventually is going to lead to an economic system called capitalism. In order to set up these expensive factories and these expensive colonies, they're going to create joint stock companies, which accept investment from individuals into these things. So you're going to get a bunch of wealthy people to give you a small amount of money in order to start up this new factory. And then once you may start making profits with that factory, you pay out dividends to your investors in order to reward them for investing in you. This system of capitalism is going to spread out the risk of all of these things and is going to lead to significant economic growth in England and other places in Europe. This is going to, of course, replace mercantilism. And so we're eventually going to see the breakdown of the mercantilist system and more countries embracing this new capitalist model. We talked previously about Adam Smith arguing that prices should be established by supply and demand. His model uses market forces, determining how much people are willing to pay for products versus how much they cost to produce, to establish an equilibrium price. And it's going to be the beginning of the removal of price controls and the rise of markets to determine how much things are worth. We're going to see a bunch of new inventions during this time period. We see water wheels and water mills starting to provide power for these things. We get spinning jennies, setting up, allowing thread to be spun into cloth much more quickly. We get flying shuttles, which allow weaving to happen much more quickly. And we get power looms, which, again, powered by first water and then eventually steam, are going to remove the human component of labor and replace it with other forms of power, which are much more reliable and less dependent on having a person using their own muscles to do the work. So all of these inventions are going to significantly increase productivity and profitability of these new industries. Here's William Radcliffe describing the advantage of power looms. So take a moment, read and answer questions, and then we're going to move forward. This is also going to lead to a expansion of transportation. Roads are obviously essential if you're going to be moving around a lot of people, equipment, and products. And good roads are really essential. Otherwise, during the seasons, especially in England, where it's very rainy, roads will get muddy, stuff will get stuck. And so the development of the McAdams Road, this type of gravel road that had a ditch where water ran off, and you have these stones, first large stones and then smaller stones, in order to still provide a solid surface even when it's wet, is going to significantly increase transportation. And so these new style of roads are going to start crisscrossing England, allowing people and products and raw materials to move around more effectively, leading to a significant expansion of economic activity. And the big invention is going to be the steam engine. The steam engine, James Watt's steam engine, was originally created in order to drain water out of mines, but it was in order to harvest coal and mine coal. And it works by heating water, which then creates steam, which then builds up pressure and pushes a piston, which then moves a wheel. This transformation of heat to movement is going to be revolutionary and is going to allow us significantly more work to be done, because all you need to do is create heat, and then that heat is going to create continuous motion much longer, stronger, and more reliably than a human could create. Here's the account of what it was like to be a worker in these mines. So take a moment to read and reflect upon this. And hopefully you can understand that this is also going to lead to a significant issue as far as working conditions, because the surplus of workers means that workers are going to become mostly disposable, and it's going to lead to pretty awful working conditions for the people working in these industries. The eventual use of steam power in order to power factories and eventually to move people and items is known as the Second Industrial Revolution. The market revolution, or the factory revolution, was the first industrial revolution, and the second industrial revolution is now going to bring in steam power, which is going to significantly increase the productivity of all of these factories. The end result of this is a massive expansion of wealth for England. I'll let you read Samuel Smiles' Thrift here and answer the attached questions. So take a moment and pause. All of this leads to a massive expansion of railroads across the country. The Manchester to Liverpool Railway was the first major railway to open in England. A railroad or a locomotive is a steam engine placed on wheels with, rather than the piston doing work to pump water, it's instead going to turn these wheels. You then build tracks, and these trains can carry large, heavy loads consistently and relatively quickly over long distances. And so we're going to see a massive expansion of railways over time. Of course, these railways are very expensive, but the return on investment is very high because you can easily move around people, supplies, and finished products and make a huge profits. The expansion of steel production through something called the Bessemer process is also going to significantly increase industrialization. Steel is an iron alloy combining iron and carbon in order to form a very strong but very flexible metal. And it's going to lead to significantly larger buildings because they can have much lighter but also durable sort of superstructures. And it's going to lead to longer and more durable bridges because the bridges can absorb some measure of movement from sort of natural and weather conditions without cracking and breaking. All of this is eventually going to kick off an era of reform in order to improve the working conditions in factories, and we're going to spend much more time talking about that in future lessons. But in England, we're going to see a series of factory acts regulating factory work, trying to protect children from the worst abuses of factory life. And for example, the Factory Act is going to limit children to working only 60 hours a week and only working 10.5 hours a day, which was a massive improvement over what they'd previously had to work. And so here's the Factory Act of 33, laying out some restrictions, basically arguing that unfettered capitalism is going to lead to abuses and that there is some role of government to regulate this in order to prevent the worst of these abuses. So here are our objectives for today. Hopefully you can answer them in some detail. When we come back tomorrow, we'll talk about some of the advantages of this and the development of bourgeoisie society or bourgeois society and how that's going to push for societal change and growth. So thank you for listening.